I'm here finally recording a new video for you guys on this channel. This channel actually was I was supposed to shift gears and just focus here, which, because I do have a mission, a purpose, which we do as chosen ones, we have purpose, right? My purpose is justice. And it is very difficult for me to take my eyes off of fighting for justice. I'm somewhat like an activist, I'm an artist activist. Um, and it gets difficult to shift gears. But I am finally over here because I just watched this new video. I do believe it's a new video. I'll link it in the description box. It could be old, but I really think it's new. Of Miss Dr. Ramani. Yes, y'all know I love her. She's one of the first ones that I started watching on narcissism because I started watching, like, it's a lot of like mental health professionals that are doing content, and that's where I started watching that. And then I started watching like mental illness, who is in a narcissist himself, or other people that have been under narcissistic abuse. So I started watching those other perspectives, but it started out with the clinical perspective because I was brand new to knowing what the heck this is. Because most of my life, I have been under narcissistic abuse for probably most of my life, unless the earlier years I wasn't, but it's nothing that I could remember. So for my life, I have been under narcissistic abuse from many different um, avenues, right? So I didn't know what the heck it was. So to finally be able to pinpoint, label, understand what you're going through, really makes you feel like it's not you that's just crazy. Because before you find that content, you just think you're Looney Tunes, honestly. I just think, and people dump so much on you that you believe that you're the way that they portray you to be. Horrible. You're a horrible person. You don't deserve love. You don't deserve attention. You don't deserve anything. You just whine and complain, and you start believing that, right? But Miss Ram, yes, Dr. Ramani released a video that was talking about narcissistic siblings. And could it be just as toxic as having a narcissistic parent? Oh my goodness. That I just left work and I sat down, had my little lunch, and I just was listening to the video and finally felt like somebody understood my life struggle. And also, it validates my feelings because my feelings have always been invalidated. That's why I struggle with knowing if I'm doing the right thing or if I'm not, because there's no meter, no measure to know whether you're right or wrong. You kind of meter or measure yourself against others. Am I right? Like, am I okay to feel this way, or is it me? Like, you usually need someone to be the truth teller in the situation. But all the people around me always made me feel like I was the one wrong. So that becomes the truth, right? But oh my gosh, so we have to go all the way back. Narcissistic abuse through siblings. I have told this story, but I'm going to retell it. Sorry. I'm going to retell it because It's on my other channel, and I have too many videos to go back through it to find it. Okay, so I am one fifth of five sisters. I grew up, I was the only child until I was almost, I don't know, I think maybe six. No. Five, something like that. When my mother told me my sister, I was going to have a sister coming, which I thought it was a baby, but my sister was actually older than me. She's 4 years and some odd months older than me. So she came to live with me, my mother, my father, and my sister. Now, my sister is my dad's first child, and I'm my mother's first child. So I'm my dad's second child. So we're half sisters, but we never made no differences like that. I grew up in a household where it really was almost perfect. We lived in a nice neighborhood. We grew up middle class. Um, we had chores split amongst us, me and my sister. My sister babysat me. This was the 80s where you can have your children babysit your other children. And we actually stayed home alone a lot, but it wasn't dangerous. It wasn't, you know. And I was made to respect and listen to my older sister. Yes, were at odds with each other. Like I used to just annoy her for no reason. Now that's regular sibling rivalry, right? But I deep down loved her. Like we would get along, but then we wouldn't. Okay, regular. But it felt like we had a regular house. I remember our house always being so clean. My mother loved plants. She had these plants that were just they was on this top wall, like center wall thing we had in our kitchen, and they grew all the way down the wall. They were so beautiful. My mother had the most beautiful plants. She loved plants. We had the cleanest, beautifulest house. We had a normal childhood. Normal. It was normal, a normal family. Now, when I was 9, my mother got pregnant with my sister. So it was my older sister, myself as the middle now, and my younger sister. Now, Dr. Ramani does talk about in the video that if you had a narcissistic older sibling, they were like in complete disdain when they found out you were going to be born. Like they could not stand it. But myself, being the older sibling, I was so excited to have a baby coming to the family. Um, and I remember writing a story. Like I wrote every detail of going to the hospital. I remember that we ate at Wendy's. Dad took us to go to Wendy's to get food, and I wrote everything. And I was so excited about a new sister. I wanted the new sister. I used to try to get her to come in my room, lay down with me, play with me, but she did not favor me like that. My older sister and my baby sister had the closest bond. So I was kind of just, my older sister graduated. She was supposed to visit the state she came from when I was 5 years old and she was 9, but she stayed. She never came back. So, and she ended up starting her own family. So that left me as the oldest and my little sister that is 9 years under me. By the time my little sister turned 3, she started having grand mal seizures. And at first, she was diagnosed as sleepwalking, but later they found out it was seizures. Now, this specific time, I don't know exactly, maybe Kristen. Oh, sorry, I wasn't trying to say her name, but my sister, her name is Kristen. Now that I said it, I think she was 4 or 5. I don't know exactly, but I remember she did something, and my mother was going to discipline her. And Kristen got mad. And my mother said, "So what? Are you going to go in the room and just have a seizure because you're mad?" And my sister said, "Yes." And lo and behold, my mother found my sister in the room. She had a seizure. So from that point, my mother no longer would discipline my sister, Kristen, because I guess in fear that it would trigger a seizure, because seizures are triggered by emotion, right? Good or bad, you can trigger a seizure by emotion. So the way my mother dealt with that was to basically place blame on me. I had to take blame for everything. And the reasoning of how it was my fault, whether it was or wasn't, whatever happened in the household, the reasoning that she would give that it was my fault was because I was the oldest. I should know better. I should do better. I have to have control over the younger sibling. So it by default, anything goes wrong, it's my fault because I'm the oldest. Okay. I also, they kept the tradition of the oldest watching the youngest children. I had to watch my younger sister. Now, what they did not keep was when my older sister watched me, I had to respect her. I had to listen to her. There wasn't no Kita was being defiant or didn't listen when I told her this or that. It wasn't that. But when I had to watch my younger siblings, that's what it was. They did not have to respect, to listen when there was altercations during the day, and I would try to voice them to my mother so that she could kind of get the child in line. So the next time I'm left with them, they can listen. She would always basically say, "You're the oldest." Basically, I have to take control. Gosh, this is hard. At the end of Miss Ramani's video, I wanted to cry. Because it's like, it's the past. You cannot fix it. You can't change it. You can't make it right. You can't nothing. And the fact that my mother is no longer here, I can't even talk about it with her. Okay, so because my sister never got in trouble, never nothing, everything was always my fault, she became completely unruly. And when I would bring to my mother's attention that Kristen is being like horribly bad, my mother would say, "I'm not being sensitive enough. Read the books." This is all I remember my mother saying. "Read the books, Kita. Read the books, Kita. Kristen doesn't want to act like this. This is her medicine making her act like this." So because I, as a child, teenager, didn't sit down and read medical books about epilepsy, I was told I was selfish and I was just not understanding or any of that. And Kristen's behavior just got really, really, really bad, which any child's behavior would if you don't discipline the child. Don't give them rules, don't give them parameters. If they break boundaries, they have to pay consequences. When you don't grow up with that, you you become ridiculous, right? So then my sister, I believe when she was 4, my mother had another child. Okay. And then 2 years later, when she was 6, my mother had my baby sister. So I am 9 years older than Kristen. I am, 13 years older than Aaliyah, 13 or 14. And I'm 15 to 16 years older than my baby sister, Nikki. When I had my little baby sisters, I as well loved them. I love kids. I have only one child. And anybody that knows me knows children are like magnets to me. There has not been, I don't think in my lifetime, one child that has not been so obsessed with me. My nephews, my nieces, my cousins, my grandchild now is so obsessed with me. Children just draw to me and love me, and I love children. So me and my little sisters, I always loved them, but it was kind of as they grew up, the two little ones grew up, seeing the middle one being unruly and not getting in trouble, not having no consequences, they started trying to mimic her behavior. By this time, my sister was fighting my mother, fighting my parents, um, you name it. The police stayed at our house. It was always arguments. It was so chaotic. And they couldn't address my sister because it's not her fault. She's on the medicine. So the younger one started, hey, Kristen has no consequences. We're going to do the same thing. So they, in turn, would like wreak havoc. And I remember it was so many times where, as they started getting of age, my mother would come home and she wouldn't even want to come in the door. My parents, the kids were so unruly. You gotta, do anybody remember the kids that you would see that were on, not Jerry Springer, on Maury's show? Them very unruly kids, very disrespectful, almost like that meet me outside girl. Like it was like having three of them and then myself. And now, remember, there were many rules for me, but there was no rules, no boundaries for three of them, my little three sisters. No matter how bad they became, I had to watch them. Summers, I couldn't do much of anything because I had to babysit three babies. Before going to high school, I had to get up and get the babies ready. And if I didn't, or I pushed back on it, my mother would say I was being selfish. Anytime I would try to talk to my mother about, hey, sometimes I know I could be wrong sometimes, but how am I wrong every single time? And you don't see them doing this. You don't see them like stirring up trouble. You don't see the bad behavior. But if I did one small little thing, they made the greatest, biggest deal. They can do something way exponentially more horrible than anything I can imagine doing, and it would be made the smallest deal. So I knew there were two sets of rules. It was rules for me that were for me and my sister in our first household dynamic, and then the chaotic, no boundaries, no rules for the other three. But I couldn't live under that chaotic, no boundaries rules. I was held to different standards. Uh, oh my gosh. This brings up a lot. Uh, and I remember anytime I always felt like if I could just sit down and talk to my mother, it would actually, we could work this out. And what my mother would do, God rest her soul, she's not here, but what she would do is she would say, anytime I tried to talk to her, she would say I was whining. Stop whining. I hate when you whine. Or when I talked to her, she would say, you were always the victim. You're always the victim. I made another video about there's actually being a victim versus victim mentality. At times I was a victim, but I couldn't air my grievances on being victimized because you were always the victim. Hold on. So it was really hard to have a relationship with my mother. My mother would always tell me, I raised you, now you got to help me raise the kids. And mind you, I was a teenager. I was 15, 16, 17. I wasn't even raised yet. But it made it where it was very difficult to have a relationship with my mother. My mother was always overwhelmed. My dad worked all the time. He was overwhelmed as well. When he came home, he didn't want to hear nothing about the bickering back and forth. He didn't want to hear nothing. So nobody would ever settle the score. That's the biggest problem. No one would ever say, "Hey, you're wrong." At times they were wrong. They should have been called out for being wrong, corrected, and then the behavior may have stopped. But it was always justified and it was always rerouted back to being my fault. And when I try to talk about it, I'm just whining and I'm playing victim. So this was my childhood. It was so much noise, chaos, confusion. When my parents came home, that eggshell, I would always be wondering, like, what did I do wrong? I know I did something wrong. I know it's going to be a matter of time before they're hollering at me. So, I mean, I just always tried to always do the right thing, always tried to behave, always tried to, but I was never good enough. No matter how good I tried to behave, I was never good enough. And they were horribly behaved, but they were good enough. That, and they were rewarded for everything that they did bad. They got everything they looked at, wanted, could think of, and I don't know, we were just treated differently. And when I tried to address it, you're told things like, "Oh, I love all my children the same." You may love us the same, but you're treating us differently. But they never. It was basically like this was all in my mind, that I'm basically fabricating and making this up, and this is not truly what's happening, right? So it was just horrible. And it really hindered having a relationship with my mother. And anytime I would try to talk to my mother, she would always say she would always be angry. I don't care when I came to her, she was angry. And she would say I just came at the wrong time, but I didn't even know when could be a possible right time to talk to you about this, because we need to resolve this. So anyways, it never resolved. And it became that my mother would say things like, "I'm just selfish. I don't see that she does love me. I just don't." I don't know. It's so many different things. And I even found posts. My mother was a writer and a reader, and I found journal entries like from my mother after her passing. I do believe she loved me, but I was just always the blame of everything. And it was to the point where I was like, "Mom, did you ever love me?" And I asked her this right a little before she died. Well, passed, because you can't say. So I asked her, "Did you ever want me? Did you love me?" Because in the past, when I said those things, she would always say no. I mean, she would always say yes. I love all my children the same. This last time, right before she passed, she said, "Kita, I loved you. I just didn't have time for you." And I accepted that. I was like, at least my mother loved me. Because that was something I never felt, that I was loved by my mother or father. I never felt or anybody. I'm not even good enough to be loved, is how I felt. Which makes you run into a lot of fake love and accept it as real, because you just want somebody to love you. So, post my mother passing, my sister to this day Two of them, I don't believe are narcissistic anymore. I don't know if that's possible, but I really don't believe. I believe they broke that narcissistic personality off of themselves. And I'm praying that my third sister, my last sister, could do it. But as it stands now, she is still highly narcissistic. And anytime I say anything to her, her go to is my mother's words that Keita, you're being a victim. She'll pull that card fast. Mom always said you was the victim. That's a lot of trauma wrapped up in that. But that's what she throws at me. Mom always said you were the victim. Now, my sister, Kristen, all of that, I don't know how, but when she turned 18, she stopped all of that. I guess she realized that she did need others. And she stopped all that fighting, cursing you out, this, and that. I'm now caregiver to her, which you never would have thought that would happen. I remember she tried to fight me when I was pregnant with my daughter. She literally, and now, who would have thought? I have another sister, the second up. She was very highly narcissistic. And even after my mother passed, I really believe marriage is what changed her. We have been able to we went on a cruise together. There is no way that I would be able to be in a closed space with this person for any length of longer than a couple of hours. But we actually, sometimes I see us actually sitting on the phone talking, and I'm like taken aback. And she actually expressed gratitude for helping with the niece and nephew because they're so in love with me. She expresses gratitude. They bought me a tablet because I'm an artist. They wanted to buy me the tablet with the little pen because the kids love me so much and they wanted to find a way to say thank you. So I believe having children and her life dynamic changing and realizing she's not the center of the universe made her shed her narcissistic tendencies. Every now and then, a small bit might arise. But the baby, and she's in her, if it's not mid, she's in her late 20s. And she's still that way. Now, I try to stay close to home. It's like it's hard for me to go off and do my own thing because I have my sister that is sick and nobody else really, my dad, but my sisters, they don't take too much care in helping with her. So I got to kind of limit how far I can go away from um, where I can get to my sister to help her with the things she needs help with, which is very frustrating that we are all sisters, but the majority of the bulk of that lies on me. And that was one of the things that my mother said she feared the most, that if anything happened to her, that my sister would not be taken care of. And that was my vow to her that I would take care of her. So it does become difficult because I'm the one. Take her shopping, help her shower, take her out because I don't like her just sitting up in the house. That's me. And then the whole time, I would not be able to focus because I have to make sure I'm being over vigilant because we don't want her to have a seizure and hurt herself. So it's a lot. And I don't even think they see anything that I do. But so that's why I stay close to the house. But also, when my sister is at the house, it's like she stays in my dad's ear. And I can even hear her many times. She don't know that I hear her. Oh, Dad, you're doing this and doing that for those that they do. Like, it's, if the house is quiet and she hear it quiet, she's gonna start something to complain about and start hollering. Her voice is so aggravating and annoying. It's like, yeah, 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 yeah. No, honestly, that is her voice. And she'll get louder. She'll, it's like testing the water. She'll come into a completely quiet house and she'll, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then if you don't say nothing, sometimes she'll go head on. She'll go in the room, she'll whatever. But sometimes she'll escalate it. Oh, that didn't make anybody respond. Let me, yeah, yeah, yeah. She'll get louder and louder and louder until sometimes you're like, could you just go head on? If I say that, could you just go head on? It is finna be an argument. It's gonna be war, whatever. And then my dad's gonna come in and he's gonna say, why don't y'all two, because I'm included in the foolishness, why y'all can't stop arguing? You know me, I'm never arguing. I don't even say anything. It should cue you that if Keita said anything, she must be at boiling point because she doesn't say anything. Keita just turn the cheek, turn the other cheek, turn that cheek, turn that one back. Like, literally. But my father will adjust both of us as though both of us are just being foolish. As I try to explain to my father, he will not hear it at all. He won't listen. He won't call a thing a thing. He won't say, yeah, you know, she's wrong or nothing. And he can't dare call her wrong, tell her she's wrong, because she's the type that goes off on my dad. She have said some very hurtful things to him, then made it feel like we all felt that way. When I had to go back and retrack and say, no, Dad, I don't feel like that. That's her that feel like that. I don't feel like that towards you. But her staying in his ear feels like it makes him have a almost like a contempt, a spirit of